Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A52 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I would definitely tell you is that I definitely do like the Samsung Galaxy A52. When it first came out, it was a good Samsung phone. I think it had a lot of capability and it was a good quality phone for the most part. Was it perfect? No. This phone definitely was not perfect by any means, but it was a good phone that was a pretty cheap device, which I actually preferred a lot. So we'll talk about this phone throughout this whole entire video. If you do want to pick up some phones that I would recommend buying this year though, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the thing you have to remember with these Samsung Galaxy A phones is that they are supposed to be like pretty cheap devices that Samsung is just kind of throwing up in the used market. This particular phone came out in 2021, so it was a significantly cheaper phone at the time, which is very, very nice. But nowadays, this phone is much cheaper than what it originally came out for. But I do think there's probably better phones that I recommend buying than this thing. On the front of this phone, you're getting a 6.5-inch Super AMOLED display. It's 1080p and it's a 90Hz panel as well, which is actually pretty, it's a decent display for what you're getting. So it's a 90Hz panel, which is nice, but it only gets 800 nits of brightness, which really is not that high. It's not really that great. So that in and of itself can be kind of an issue. Like if you're going through and getting any sort of device, it's probably best if you're getting a phone that's going to be giving you a better experience. And with this particular device's panel, it's not terrible by any means. But like I said before, you're definitely going to be getting a better display if you go for something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 that year, or one of those types of devices when it comes down to it. So that right there is just like one small little tiny thing to kind of keep in mind there. On top of that, you're getting a USB Type-C port on the bottom, which is great. You're getting lots of little cool little features built in inside of that particular phone there, which is nice. The sides of this phone are kind of curved, but it's still kind of nice for the most part. Again, there's not really like too many things to kind of complain about here from that particular perspective either. On the back side, you're getting this frosted kind of plastic back, which again is pretty interesting, having a frosted plastic back inside of this thing, but again, not the biggest deal in the world. You're getting a triple camera setup or a quadruple camera setup, depending on how you look at it, and that kind of covers it up on the outside. Some things to kind of keep in mind here though. For one, you are missing out on things like wireless charging. There's no wireless charging on this phone, which can be kind of annoying for some people, but you are getting IP certification, which is kind of nice to have. So you're getting those two things. Another pretty crazy thing though, you are getting a microSD card slot inside of this particular phone. So this in and of itself is another very, very nice thing. Having a microSD card slot in and of itself is such a nice thing to have, and I personally love having a phone that is giving me that type of capability. So again, if I'm going through and if I'm buying some sort of a device, I love the fact that my phones are giving me this type of capability because it is a really, really nice thing to have. So microSD card slot, it's a pretty decent thing to have instead of a phone that's this cheap. So from that particular perspective, that kind of covers it up there. From the price tag side, this is another interesting thing that you kind of have to keep in mind here. Because with this particular phone, you're essentially going to be getting a device that is, not the most expensive phone anymore. And it is actually a fairly cheap phone when it comes down to it. So it's kind of cheap when it first came out, but it is significantly cheaper now than it was before. And that's another thing you're going to have to keep in mind here. So with this particular phone, you have to remember that this particular device is going to be giving you a phone that's going to be sub $200. But I will tell you, you can probably spend a little bit more money and get a much better device than this thing. So a Samsung Galaxy S21, which came out the same year as this one, is probably going to be giving you an overall better experience than this particular device. So just that in and of itself, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy this phone because you can just go and buy another phone like the Samsung Galaxy S21 and get a phone that's going to be better than this one from that particular perspective. So that's just another one of those minor things to keep in mind there. On top of that, another thing to keep in mind is the camera. So this phone is going to be giving you a 64 megapixel wide-angle lens, 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera, 5 megapixel macro lens, and then a 5 megapixel depth camera. On the front, you're getting a 32 megapixel front-facing camera. Now, the thing I will definitely tell you about this particular camera is that it's not a bad camera, 4K at 30 on the front and the back, and for like a budget phone of 2021, like it's not the worst camera of all time, and it does kind of make sense for what you're getting here. But the thing you kind of have to keep in mind here is that with something like the Samsung Galaxy A51, this isn't like that great of a performing camera anymore. Even when it first came out, it wasn't that great. The Galaxy S21 was giving you 8K capability. So the fact that this particular phone was giving you a very, very, watered down camera, even at that, in those standards, wasn't really the best look for it. But it makes sense and it's not like the biggest deal in the world. Another thing you're going to have to keep in mind here is that with this particular device, once again, you're getting a device that really is kind of outdated when it comes down to its camera. You are getting the standard type of camera layout that you're getting, which is nice, and there's not too many issues going on with that from there. But the main thing you're going to have to keep in mind here is that no 4K 60 on the front and the back, kind of a limited camera, and especially inside of those social media applications, you might be getting very, very watered down camera when it comes down to it. So keep that in mind. Again, it's not like the biggest deal in the world or anything like that, but if you are going to be getting some sort of a phone, you're going to be getting devices that are going to be giving you a better experience in almost every single way, just for slightly better cameras for the most part. So that right there is another very, very interesting thing that I want to just kind of keep in mind with this particular phone. Now, on top of that, another big thing I want to keep in mind here is that with this particular device, you are getting a phone that was supported with software for a little bit of time. And I do think that is another big thing to kind of keep in mind here too. Like I will definitely tell you, for the most part, like if you're going through and getting a, any sort of phone, for the most part, you want it to still, be supported with software. And with the Samsung Galaxy A51, this particular device, it really is kind of a limited type of experience in terms of the software perspective. And that is kind of the issue here. Like if you're going through and getting a phone like this one, it stopped getting upgrades at Android 13. And this in and of itself is kind of an issue going on for this particular phone. So I feel like if you're getting a phone out there, you probably want it to still be supported with software. And with this particular phone, that's not really what's going on here. So once again, just kind of keep that in mind. Not the biggest deal in the world or anything, but if you're going through and getting any sort of device, you probably want it to, give you a better experience here. So take it as you will, but that's another thing to kind of keep in mind here as well. From the performance, you're getting that Qualcomm Snapdragon 720G chipset inside with 4 or 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. And the thing with these particular devices is that with these A series, Samsung has always gone through and basically put in the lowest amount of RAM and the most amount of RAM they put in some of their phones ever. And with this one at that time, 8 gigabytes of RAM was the top tier you can get here, but that was really the base model of the S21 at the time. And you have to remember, if you're spending more money, if you're getting more RAM, you're spending more money. So with this phone, another thing you're going to have to keep in mind here is that this particular device's performance isn't that bad. It's a good, decent performing phone for what it was at the time, but nowadays it definitely is a slower performing device. It's not going to be that good of a performing phone. And again, that's just kind of what happens when you're getting these types of older devices, because especially from these A series, because they weren't really that fast when they first came out, and they've only really gotten slower since then. So they're not that great. The performance of these phones really isn't that great either. So that in and of itself is another big thing to keep in mind. And even the battery life of this phone, 4,500 milliamp hours, that's a very big size phone to have that's a very big size battery to have inside of a phone that isn't like that performance heavy. So that right there is another very cool thing going on for this particular device when it comes down to it. So overall, I'll definitely tell you the Galaxy A51 isn't really a phone I'd recommend people to buy anymore. This is a pretty watered down device, but when it first came out, it was pretty important. But I just don't think it makes any sense for any single person to go and buy this phone. You're much better off purchasing a phone that's still supported, that's still there. Phones like the Galaxy S21, the S22, S24, the Galaxy, those phones are going to be much better than this phone in my personal opinion. So that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.